Hi, this is Amy with the Hag Reads. I am back for my weekly wrap-up. I am running a little late today. Just as I was getting ready to film one of my subscription channels that I have just subscribed to came on with a live chat, and it's something that's an interest to me right now, and so I postponed a little bit to watch the live chat. So that was quite fun and interesting, and yeah, it's nice when you get a little surprise like that. For my weekly wrap-up, this covers the week of June 5th through June 11th. I read 7 books, 5 adult fiction, 1 adult nonfiction, and 1 YA book. And I still have, let me see here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 books left over from the last video I did, of the books I listed, and then I have 1 in progress, but it's not from the last video. It's The Burning World from it's the sequel, or perhaps part of the start of a longer series. I'm not sure if I haven't gotten farther long enough to know if they're going to have more books in the series, but it's the second book after Warm Bodies, which was also a movie not that long ago. Not sure how I feel about it so far. I'm only about 50 or 60 pages in, and I can't decide if I like where this is going or not. So I may have been better off having not known there was another book. We'll see how it works out. But for the books that I have read this week, the first one was Goddess of Spring, which is part of the Goddess Summoning series by PC Cast. The main character in this is named Lena. Full name was Carolina, who owns a bakery with some tax issues that she is trying to bring in some new items to expand her menu a little bit, to increase her clientele. She had an unfortunate incident with her accountant, and she's trying to remedy that in an effort to decide what it is she wants to offer. She doesn't just want to offer the same thing that everybody else offers. She wants to do something unique that she can kind of personalize. She goes across the street. She lives in kind of an artsy area, or the business is located in an artsy area, so there's like unique used bookshop, and there are specialty shops all along where she's located. So she goes over to the used bookstore across the street and picks up a pile of cookbooks and takes them home with her, has some wine, flips through all the cookbooks, and of course the last one, she finds this amazing pizza recipe that she wants to try, but it's also kind of a magical working or a spell to Demeter, and she personalizes it for help in the bakery, and for inspiration. And then romantic mayhem ensues. She is tapped by Demeter to trade places with her daughter Persephone, and Persephone winds up in the bakery as her, and Lena winds up as Persephone in the underworld with Hades. And these are all, I'm only on the second one obviously, but so far they're very sweet kind of romantic stories with a slight twist on the standard mythology. And I really am enjoying this series a bunch. I am hoping that I got Goddess of Light from the library in my last library haul, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. I'm hoping I can get to it by the end of this week or the start of next week, just because they're really sweet, and there was sex in it, but it's not overly explicit, and it just right book right now, I guess. but it's light paranormal, I guess, goddess based type uh, romance books. But it's very sweet, and I'm really enjoying it. The second book was The Murder House by James Patterson and David Eliis. And in this one, police detective Jenna Murphy has come home to her. I think this takes place in the Hamptons, but someplace East Coast beach, with a rich summer, people come in and to the beach houses and whatnot. And she had visited there as a child with her parents every year until she was 8 or 9, and then something happened, I guess, and they never went back. And so this thing is alluded to often. She is the niece of the police chief there, and he gets her a job after she had some difficulties in New York, where she was a police officer. And almost immediately after she gets there, there's a series of brutal murders that takes place. They are brutal and sadistic, and that kind of rock the community. And so she's trying to work on solving this, but at least, as is the case with the first mystery, a local man is kind of railroaded for it at the behest. It's insinuated at the behest of one of the rich homeowners. And so the police chief does not want her involved, and she can't figure out why. And so there are kind of shades of local police corruption and things like that. And as the story goes on, it's kind of the whole plot of the book is we follow shitty, questionable people doing shitty, questionable things. There's a lot of inappropriate behavior on her part, and everybody is hiding something, and they're all being just shitty. I'm sorry, I don't have a better word for it. The idea of the book is interesting, the premise of the murder house and the history of the family that is revealed throughout, so I don't want to say a whole lot about that because it is kind of a slow reveal as the book goes on. And the resulting damage that the family associated with the house did to the local community. So I wound up giving it 2 stars because the reveal of the murderer was frustratingly disappointing. And I can't even say why because it would give away the book. But it's not an illogical choice. It's just, there's supposed to be that twist where you go, oh, and it was like just disappointing because it wasn't. I can't even tell you why, or I'll spoil the book. I'm sorry. It was disappointing to me. There seemed to be, when I went back afterwards and I was rating it on Goodreads and I read some of the reviews, a lot of people were dissatisfied with this book. A few people really, really loved it. It was engrossing. I found myself wanting to know what happens, but I didn't feel satisfied after I had read it, and I found a lot of the characters to just be completely unlikable. I couldn't identify with any of them. So the third book is Robogenesis, which is the second, and I am going to assume the concluding book in the duology for the Robopocalypse series. We're back with it concludes shortly after the events of Robopocalypse. Presumably just enough time has passed for the McCormack to have written the book that is Robopocalypse, and we're left with the aftermath of the events of the first book and the putting back together of things. And I don't think in a second book you can go too far into detail. But it basically, the AI in this book is different than the AI in the previous book, and uses the basest, most unappealing, most shitty aspects of human nature to drive its own agenda in achieving sentience on a greater scale. The plot puts two human armies, the army from the first book, and then a second army which has come up from Mexico, both with leaders that exhibit extreme personality changes, and the people around them don't seem to notice or care, behaving completely out of character with what they had once apparently been. And so from that aspect, that nobody questioned it, and several of the main characters from the first book just essentially gave up and allowed this to happen. And I found that frustrating, that it was allowed to play out this way just because people went, oh well, not my circus, not my monkeys, when it really was their circus and their monkeys. I gave it 3 stars. I felt like the ending was satisfying enough. I just found that there was some frustration with this particular two armies thing, and then the freeborn robots in there were extremely annoying to me, except for a few specific characters that had more interaction with humans. They certainly left it open for future books, but this book was published in 2014. So, and the previous volume I think was just a year before. So if there were going to be more, I would assume that there would be word of it already, that there was going to at some point be a 3rd volume in this. But they also wrapped it up to a satisfying conclusion if there's never any more books, which would be my preference. I think it was left just fine. I think going any further with this would only accentuate the problems. I just think you couldn't have a satisfying book of another AI or a continuation of any of the previous AIs, and have it be plausible and enjoyable. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel right now. My 4th book was A Witch with No Name by Kim Harrison, which is the conclusion of the Hollow series. Just a big hot mess as ever with amoral master vampires, using Rachel as a relationship, partnership with Ivy to further their own personal agenda. The whole book series seems to be, well, this whole book, it felt like back and forth schoolyard threats. If you do this, I'm going to do that. And who calls a master vampire with no moral values, no conscience, on the carpet? If you do X, I'm going to, kill you or do a specific thing, or I'm not going to do what you want. They don't care. They're going to, they no conscience. They'll do whatever it takes to force you, short of killing you, to do what they want. So that kind of, the whole interaction with that frustrated me, because it's not a realistic stance. You can't take a hard line with somebody who has no conscience. They don't care. They don't care what the consequences are to you or anyone else or anyone around them. It's a me situation. So for that part, no. A lot of the interaction in the book just felt like a rehash. It's of the relationships, Ivy and Nina, Ivy and Rachel, Ivy, Nina, and Rachel, and the animosity between Nina and Rachel, Rachel and Trent, and then Trent and Elizabeth, and then the three of them, and the animosity between Rachel and Elizabeth. Same shit, different book. The conclusion was kind of a storybook, happily ever after, and it was satisfying enough. You know, they wrapped things up in a way that I felt like was reasonably realistic based on the series overall, and I'm mostly just glad it's over. I didn't dislike the series as I am coming to do with, say, the Hannah Swenson series, where I've reached the point that if someone killed Hannah, I would not be upset. But that's just me. I gave it 3 stars. I couldn't see my way to 4 for a conclusion because some elements of the book just continue to annoy me as plot devices. I feel like, how much drama do you need, you know, to continue to yank the rug out from under the same characters over and over again in exactly the same way in every book, even if the object of the rug yanking is different. It's essentially the same plot in every book. 5th book was Quiet Neighbours by Catriona McPherson and avocados. Somebody is just sending me a message with the word avocados in it. I'm sure that's very important. I am kind of at a loss at how to describe this book. The main character is Jude, and she is running away from something in London. She runs to this small town in Scotland where she went on vacation, and remembers a particular bookstore and its owner as having given her a sense of solace internally in a very short interaction. And in desperation, she returns there and basically loses her shit in front of this guy. And he turns out to be the nicest, most pushover guy ever. He takes her in, gives her a job, provides her a place to stay. Shortly after she's settled in, then a secondary character comes in, Edie, who claims to be the daughter of Lowell, who is 19 years old and very pregnant, and she's looking for a familial connection, also needs a place to stay. So she sort of displaces Jude a little bit, but not exactly. There's some friction between the two of them that, of course, Lowell is completely oblivious to. And then from there, kind of these 2.5 mysteries. The half mystery is Jude's, whatever it is she's running away from, which is revealed slowly. And I think the way that it was written in the book would have worked better for like a TV series or a movie. It's that kind of slow reveal where you get this part and then this part. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pause this. Avocados, apparently extremely important. All right. So, yes, avocados. Yum. So where was I? The time span in this book is only 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month at the most for the whole book. And it feels so much longer than that. This is slow moving. It takes probably until I want to say the halfway point before we get beyond this kind of slow piecemeal revelation where you get this little bit about what happened, and it's just a bare teaser, and then you get a little bit more detail and it doesn't look good, and then you get a little bit more detail and it's a kind of ambiguous larger detail, and then you start to get some flashbacks as it goes on, and eventually the whole story behind why Jude is there is revealed. But it takes a long time before we get to even the longer ambiguous reveal. And then there's another mystery which goes back 20 years and involves local people who died at a ripe old age, but they're trying to figure out, based on the the annotations in some book club books that are in the used bookstore where Jude is working and which Lowell owns. And then there's the third mystery, which is Edie's origins and the backstory therein. And that is kind of also a slow reveal in sections. And then there's this kind of intertwining of Lowell had in the 20 years, the period where Edie was conceived and born, it was kind of a summer of love sort of thing for him, although it was in the 80s. It had a very hippie feel to it. He had some people living in his house who were younger than him, who were kind of free spirits. And so there's that kind of, it's like a return to what was a happy time in his life, but will he be able to achieve it with these people who all have secrets to hide? And I quite enjoyed this. I kept reading and reading. I read this in about 2 sittings over 2 days, so very quickly. And I would not recommend it for anybody who likes a mystery that is fast-paced and action-packed. This is extremely slow-moving, almost to the point of frustration, but not quite for me. It had good reviews on Goodreads for the most part. I've never heard of this author, but a couple of comments made were that it didn't quite have the dark atmosphere that some of her other writing does. It didn't quite achieve that level of atmospheric depressiveness, I guess, that it's maybe characterized in some of her other work. And I wouldn't know because this is my first venture, but I would certainly read more by her because I enjoyed this. My adult nonfiction book was The Gift of Fear by Gavin Becker, and I had to read it by the 11th, and I was up on the 10th. I started it when I got up. I was reading and reading and reading, and you have other things you have to do in the day. I had to cook, wash dishes, scrub the floors, that sort of thing. But I wound up staying up overnight until 5 in the morning to finish it because it was due on the 11th, and I didn't want to have to recheck it out when I only had about 100 pages left. Because it was nonfiction, it was a slower read than almost any fiction I would pick up. But not in a technical or hard to read sort of way. For a nonfiction book, this reads very well. It's extremely accessible to a layperson. I won't say enjoyable because the subject matter here is, it's dedicated to teaching people the concept of that feeling you get, your intuition about people or situations where you just feel like something is wrong or off and you can't put your finger on why. He presents it kind of as a human defense mechanism, maybe very instinctual gut reactions to things that you pick up on. And then he says we're kind of trained out of it by society. That these are unconscious observations that cue you that something about that person isn't right, or something about that situation is wrong and dangerous, and you don't know why. But oftentimes, if you have given into this later on, you find out something really bad did happen. That person was a very bad person or not nice. But that we have been socialized out of trusting intuition, particularly in women, which grooms us to ignore and dismiss this defense mechanism to our own detriment, giving access to our lives to rapists and abusers, con men, that sort, and to explain away behaviors that clearly indicated something bad was going to happen. In the case of mass shootings, there were indications that things were wrong and people just ignored them, justifying them in various ways. And it's not a blame placing. He doesn't place the blame, he's not like, it's all the parents' fault because they didn't ignore the signs, or it's all the teachers' faults because they clearly saw that this was a person who had problems and who was, and on and on. He's just explaining what the signs are that perhaps we might have been able to pick up on if we weren't glossing it over with a nice sheen of social politeness and unwillingness to rock the boat and seem like a dick or a bitch when some guy comes up that you don't know in your stairwell and you have dropped some groceries and he offers to help you carry them to your apartment. But you immediately have that sense that, where did this guy come from? Why is he in the hallway? He doesn't live here. I've never seen this guy before. And in that particular example that he gave, I'm really not doing it justice, but this woman, because he said some kind of backhanded things about how he guessed she wouldn't accept his help because she was snotty, or that he wasn't good enough, she wound up accepting his help and she got raped. But that kind of thing where you are put off by somebody on a dark street or at your car in a relatively deserted parking lot, and your socialization kicks in that you are not supposed to be rude, that you don't want to come off as bitchy. You want to trust that people are good and right and honest, and that is not always the case. So the book is filled with examples and lists of things. I would recommend it to just about anybody who has an interest in this sort of thing. He does not have an educational background in this. This is all experience training over the course of his life, based on some things that happened in his childhood that he was able to parlay into business opportunities and slowly expanding to expert level. So it's an interesting read, a study in human nature for things that we don't really talk about. The nice guy who never did anything that made you think that he was violent or was going to murder his whole family, and you're shocked and surprised, but there really were clues in there, and it's because of the way we're socialized and the way that we choose to ignore things that tickle our intuitive nature. So extremely interesting in that light. I certainly would recommend it if you are at all interested in that sort of thing. My YA book was The Suffering by Ren Chupeco. I'm sure I may be murdering that. Chupeco, I think is what it is. It's the conclusion of the duology for The Girl in the Well. It's at its heart, it's a revenge story. The main character is Tark, and he, from the first book, and the spirit of Okiko is attached to him and kind of protects him from other ghosts who basically want to kind of use him as a vessel. So she is using him in the same way, but kind of with permission. And so the first part of the book is set in the school, and then some things happen, and Okiko is driven to punish basically child murderers and molesters who have gotten away with it. And then something happens in the school setting, and it causes Tark to question the way that they are connected. Like, he doesn't know if he can go on with this connection because of what happens. And then the second part of the book is set in the Okigara, the suicide forest in Japan. And it kind of gives the forest an origin story for why it is a place that people are drawn to, and drawn to commit suicide specifically. And so the largest question here is, will Tark and Okiko be able to unravel this mystery and get to the source of why, you know, the forest is the way it is, and can they, and in the effort here is to find his aunt, who went in with a film crew, you know, a ghost hunters kind of thing, and they all disappeared. So they go in looking for this aunt and the film crew, and they go missing as well. And the missing portion of that is the attempt to solve this mystery at the origin of the suicide forest. And I could not put this book down. I gave it 4 stars. It is certainly not great literature. It is not even, I would say, great writing, but it's compelling. As a horror novel, I found it engaging and entertaining in its own way, and so I definitely really loved this. That is all for today, and I will be back on, I hope, Wednesday with a work in progress Wednesday video. Wednesdays right now are a little tough for me, so maybe I will film it on Tuesday and upload it on Wednesday. Happy whatever time of day it is for you. If you stayed till the end, thank you, and have a great rest of the week. Bye!